Life at Jane and Eduardo's ranch was divided now into the joyous before and the somber after. The kidnapping of Eduardo Valseca brought with it an unrelieved trauma. Soon all the children understood it was no business trip their father had taken. Within hours, the word spread, was whispered around the school, around the neighborhood, around the town. Jane, still in shock, tried to keep life normal.
But what if Charles is more than just someone who rides horses?
Even helping her children's teachers at school, as if everything was just the same.
She was very bad inside because we know her, and she was suffering, but she was trying to be okay in front of the children.
Jane and her federal police advisor dutifully placed those bizarre want ads, saying they didn't have the $8 million U.S. ransom. And the response? A few weeks into the ordeal, Eduardo's kidnappers turned up the pressure. They began including in their untraceable emails letters from Eduardo himself. And what he wrote in those letters was awful. I'm suffering more than I can manage. They beat me. They tie me up. I'm naked. I haven't eaten. I'm going crazy. I can't handle this torture anymore.
It was horrible. There was something about seeing his handwriting and the way he described it. It destroyed me, broke my heart. That was the first time I had to take a tranquilizer.
But there was more, and it was worse. The letter took an accusing turn. Our children are going to know that by not paying money, you left me to die.
You left me to die in a frightening way, and our children will know that you did that. And
right.
I would have gotten you out already if it had been you.
Right.
What's it?
Even in the worst possible situation, I knew that some of those things did not come from him, that he was writing what he was told to write. That was very clear to me.
She was desperate. All she had was a household checking account. They'd put the cars, the ranch, the savings accounts in Eduardo's name. Try as she might, she couldn't touch it.
And I felt so helpless. I wanted to do something. I wanted to take him out of that hole, and
So she began selling things. First to go, the Spanish horses Eduardo loved so much, sold for a fraction of their value.
We had lots of rabbits, and so I started selling rabbits. I sold sheep. I sold machinery. Everything I could sell, I sold.
All the fire sale prices?
Mm-hmm.
All of it made hardly a dent. They wanted $8 million. She raised $20,000. In her ad, she begged the kidnappers to understand she would never have the millions they wanted. They retaliated.
They had started saying in their emails to me that if I didn't come up with the money on a certain date, that they were going to start cutting off his fingers.
And when Jane couldn't pay, the answer was swift.
It said that that I'd been fooling around enough, and that Eduardo had sent me a package.
She was horrified. Was it his fingers? The federal agent, afraid for Jane's safety, sent someone else to follow the kidnapper's directions to the buried package wrapped in plastic. And it was not severed fingers. It was a sheaf of IOUs signed by Eduardo. With these, wrote the kidnappers, Jane could get a loan for the ransom.
I was supposed to now use to go to people to hopefully be more successful in raising funds that way.
Oh, she tried. But local businessmen dismissed the IOUs as likely forgeries. Summer passed. And then October, 4 months into his captivity, another email with a letter from Eduardo. They'd injected him with AIDS-tainted blood, he wrote. And then his words turned ugly, like a man she didn't know. Who are you, really? He wrote. I never thought you could be this cruel and stubborn and such a bitch. When the hell are you going to pay? The words, she felt sure, were not his. But the torture, the daily horrors, she could only imagine. Thanksgiving approached. The children pulled out old home videos and huddled in their mother's bed.
Bravo! For a long time, the kids watched it every single day after school. And sometimes when they weren't around, I'd go in and just watch the part where he blew me the kiss and said, I love you, again and again.
I love you.
And then the next email arrived, and a photo was attached. Eduardo, crumpled in a corner, dotted with dried blood. It was November, 5 months into the ordeal, when the kidnappers seemed to tire of the game. The email? Eduardo is going to receive his first gunshot in his left leg unless there is a change in the total amount offered to 7 figures. It wasn't a bluff. A photo followed. Bloody proof.
I snapped that day. I couldn't cry. I didn't react.
Did you see these photographs of Eduardo?
I told my agent that he needed to start being my filter, that I would not be reading any more letters, and I would not look at any photographs if he wanted me to get through this and get through this sane. So, that was the deal.
2 weeks later, they shot Eduardo again, this time in an arm.
Buenas tardes, la tienda Nina, ¿en qué le puedo ayudar?
To make matters worse, the newspaper, her only way of communicating with her husband's tormentors, had become suspicious and refused to take more ads.
And I had to communicate what was happening to the kidnappers, because if they didn't let me place at least one last ad, it would look like I had lost interest and I was no longer communicating. I had to now beg the woman on the phone to please allow me to place one more, and then I would never do it again.
The negotiations switched to another paper. But then the phone calls began.
I thought it would be someone disguising their voice, and that's what I'd been trained for.
The agent had warned her it might happen, had even prepared dialogue for her to memorize, and kept this erase board handy so he could prompt her. But it wasn't the kidnappers who got on the phone.
I was shaking. I didn't know what to do.
It was Eduardo, but the things he said. This could not be the man she loved, but it was.
And then he started calling me names. You're such a bitch. How could you do this? It's my money. And it was more of the same that I'd been getting in the letters that they had forced him to write.
She turned to the young federal agent.
And he told me, Jane, you've been preparing for this. You can do this. Just relax.
It's like the man you're desperate to have home and who you miss horribly is on the phone with you. You're listening to his voice and you find you're kind of arguing with this voice.
It was absolutely bizarre. And it was, we were both playing a role. After I answered the immediate questions and got the information that I wanted to make sure that they heard, which was very important to save his life, then I changed my tone, and in came me. And I told him how much I loved him. And how much his kids missed him. And then I would do anything to get him back, and then the money didn't matter. That I'd give everything I could. And then I could hear his tone change completely, and it was the real him. He told me he loved me too, and then they hung up on him.
The phone calls were untraceable, the kidnappers' demands unrelenting, the psychological pressure excruciating. A joyless Christmas arrived. New Year's. How long before they killed him?